So, we've come to the sixth part in our Anita Sarkeesian vs. Humanity series, and before we get into it, let's recall what we've found so far. In the first episode, we've seen Anita turning against the Socratic idea that humans are reasoning beings that should be led to understand things by themselves, and instead promoting the idea that humans are basically automatons that are being programmed and conditioned by outside stimuli. In the following episodes, we've seen how this leads her to adopt a host of anti-liberal views, which I deem to be harmful to the progress of Western civilization. There's no surprise there, since the assumption at the basis of liberal thought is the idea that most humans are good at their core, and if we give them freedom to think, they will become better people. The authoritarian mindset, on the other hand, assumes that the inclination of the human heart is evil, so humans need to be disciplined into obeying moral laws. Anita is obviously of the latter persuasion, but what's worse in her case is that she seems to apply it not to all humans, but only to one specific group.
On the surface, victimized women are framed as the reason for the hero's torment. But if we dig a little deeper into the subtext, I'd argue that the true source of the pain stems from feelings of weakness and/or guilt over his failure to perform his socially prescribed patriarchal duty to protect his women and children.
And I hated myself for allowing this to happen to her and our little girl.
In this way, these failed hero stories are really about the perceived loss of masculinity and then the quest to regain that masculinity, primarily by exerting dominance and control through the performance of violence on others.
So apparently, Anita doesn't think that men are capable of loving their women and children to the point where losing them would drive them to go out and seek revenge. She frames revenge stories as a story in which men go out to regain their masculinity, because they have been programmed by society to believe that a man must protect his wife and children. Basically, she denies that men have human feelings. Once again, we meet the theme of dehumanization, which we've discussed in our first episode. To be fair to Anita, we should mention the context in which she makes the claim we've just heard. Her argument is that the games fail to establish the female victims as fully fleshed human beings, before they get slain.
Instead, these are strictly male-centered stories, in which, more often than not, the tragic damsels are just empty shells, whose deaths are depicted as far more meaningful than their lives. Generally, they're completely defined by their purity, innocence, kindness, beauty, or sensuality. In short, they're just symbols meant to invoke the essence of an artificial feminine ideal.
Therefore, she proceeds to argue that the gamer cannot possibly form a true emotional relationship with them, so the motives for the revenge must be regaining his masculinity. Since I've never played these games, I don't know how true the first argument is, but I will say that I agree that good storytelling requires that we come to care about the victim before she gets killed. The more of a complete human she is, the more we feel the loss, and the more our quest for revenge is infused with a powerful emotional charge. However, to say that the gamer will not care about her at all if the creators fail to make her fully fleshed, shows a deep misunderstanding of human nature. As humans, we are perfectly capable of infusing a situation with our own emotional baggage. Think about our own loved ones and identify with our hero when he experiences his loss. We are not automatons who only work within the parameters set for us. We are thinking beings who can bring our own thoughts into the setting. Denying this capability is, once again, a form of dehumanizing the gamer. But there's something else I want to focus on here. As we've just heard, at the same time that Anita is dehumanizing the male gamer, she is demanding of the game developers to humanize the female character. In other words, we now find that what I've accused her of in the first episode should be limited to only half of humanity. She does not dehumanize all humans. She only dehumanizes men, while it seems that she is quite capable of seeing the humanity in women. What we have here is misandry, hatred of men, and this hate pervades many parts of Anita's rhetoric. Let's look at another example. In part 3 we've seen how Anita regards sexual intercourse as an act in which the woman is not a participant, but an object that the man uses for his own pleasure. We've pointed out that Anita is objectifying women with this view. Now let's talk about how she perceives the man's role in the intercourse. Anyone who is in any way familiar with men knows that the highest goal in sex for most of them is to bring the female partner to an orgasm, to give her the best experience she can have. Here's one case in a video game in which the protagonist appears to have achieved that goal.
Buying and using prostituted women for sex rewards the player with power-ups, stat boosts, and/or health regeneration.
I may just have to find a new job. You know what they say about coming with the customers.
Which means that these women fulfill basically the same function as the beverages the player can purchase from vending machines and convenience stores in these games.
So our hero had sex with a prostitute, and she tells him that it was so good that it made her lose a professional detachment. He is apparently naive enough to believe this line, and it gives his ego a boost. But Anita's misandry makes her completely deaf to this dynamic. She thinks that the hero got a boost from buying and consuming the sexuality of a woman. He is a man, so obviously he doesn't care about how he made a woman feel. All he cares about is using the woman for his needs. That is what Anita thinks men are like. You might interject here and claim that it is still an egotistical act on the part of the man, that he cares about how the woman feels only to satisfy his ego. But then, you can say the exact same thing about any altruistic act. Humans are not completely egotistical creatures. We have empathy, we enjoy seeing other people happy, and we are happy and satisfied whenever we are the cause of that happiness. The fact that Anita seems completely unaware of this side of humanity suggests one of two things. Either she is a sociopath who is devoid of empathy and therefore cannot recognize it in other people, or she hates men so much that she denies that they have empathy. The latter explanation seems more plausible, and once we accept it, we can begin to understand how Anita thinks video games affect male gamers.
When women are used as sexualized experience point dispensers, the sexual scenarios are themselves a reward designed to validate the masculinity of presumed straight male players.
Anita's defenders always tell me that I'm being unfair to her. Why do I even bring up what she thinks about gamers, when actually what she talks about is not the gamers but the games? All she does, they say, is criticize video games and the misogyny contained in them. But actually, as we now find, the so-called misogyny that she finds in the games is all based on a hateful perception of the male gamers. She presupposes that the gamers are misogynists, and therefore she believes that they experience the games in ways that validate their misogyny. As we've noted in the previous episodes, Anita fails to point out even one case in which a video game is explicitly promoting abuse of women. Her entire premise is that these games are experienced in misogynistic ways, and that premise is based on the way she believes men are.
On a shallow surface level, these vignettes seem to contextualize violence against women in a negative light. However, these narratives are never really about the abused women in question. Instead, depictions of female pain and victimhood are flippantly summoned to serve as sideshow attractions and storylines about other things altogether. These scenes are programmed to repeat themselves randomly dozens of times during gameplay. If the player reaches the victim within the 10-second intervention window, the woman can be rescued by killing her abuser. However, if the player doesn't reach her in time, she is murdered and the perpetrator will flee, providing gamers the opportunity to hunt you down. Tellingly, if the player gets too close to the assault before it occurs, the abuser will be scared off and the player will fail the mission.
Tellingly? What is that telling, exactly? Here's what Anita thinks it is telling. She complains about the fact that the game doesn't provide the option to rescue the woman without her being abused, and thinks that this proves that the developers and gamers don't really care about women, but rather treat them as excuses to prove their masculinity by punishing the assailant.
The only options available are to wait until the assault is in progress, then either take out the perpetrator during the assault, or take him down after the assault has happened. No game mechanics are provided to call an EMT, administer first aid, or check in on the victim. Meaning that these female characters exist to be assaulted, in order to give the player something to do, a reason to chase down the bad guy, exact vigilante justice on him, and gain the allotted experience points.
But if she gave gamers more credit, she'd realize that they understand that this isn't real life but an action game, which is designed to be only about action. Within these limited parameters, the gamer is called upon to do the right thing, rescue the woman and punish her abuser. It doesn't mean that it doesn't know that in real life there are other options. Anita assumes that a male gamer doesn't really want to help women, and that is why she accuses the game of reinforcing this inclination. Another grievance Anita has against this game, as we've just heard, is that these incidents repeat themselves again and again and create an environment in which violence against women becomes tedious and normal. I have to admit that I don't like it either. As I've stated, I don't play video games, but sometimes I watch YouTubers doing a playthrough of some game, and this feature is something that I always find annoying. The fact that the same thing can repeat itself again and again until the gamer completes the task hampers the realism, and takes me out of the story. I suppose that gamers are so used to it by now that they don't even notice it anymore, but for me it is still a nuisance. For Anita, however, it is a much bigger deal. She doesn't think that gamers perceive it as just one act of violence. In her view it is accumulative, and every repeated violent act adds to the conditioning in the gamer's mind to regard abuse of women as a normal thing. Here, Anita is basically blaming the video game mechanics of being misogynistic.
During the sequence, the killer will run and take a courtesan hostage.
Don't come any closer, or I will carve up another one.
If the player gets too close, the assailant will slit
Don't
her
make
throat
me kill again.
and run to the next nameless courtesan. Take her hostage, murder her,
It wasn't my fault. She laughed at me. She made me do it. Another one.
Then grab another.
Your hands.
murder her, grab another, and another, until the player manages to shoot and kill the perpetrator from a sufficient distance.
Leave me alone.
Anita exposes a misandry in full in this segment, in which she talks about the function of background women in action games. Those women who are irrelevant to the plot and are there just to make it seem more like real life, where you encounter a lot of people who are not relevant to what you're doing. The gamer, naturally, can choose to engage with these characters in all the ways he can with the relevant characters, including beating them up to a bloody pulp. Or he can choose not to, but here's what Anita thinks of that choice.
Now, inevitably, whenever these game mechanics are criticized, some gamers try to dismiss and distance themselves from the issue by insisting that they don't personally partake in the provided options for exploiting virtual women. But whether or not an individual player chooses to use an object for its intended purpose is irrelevant, because that object was still designed and placed in the game environment to fulfill its function. A toaster is still a toaster, regardless of whether or not you choose to make toast with it. It's still designed for the express purpose of toasting bread, and it still communicates that fact even while sitting unused on your kitchen counter. Likewise, a sex object is still a sex object, regardless of whether or not you personally choose to use and abuse her, and that fact, in and of itself, still communicates extremely regressive ideas about women.
So, Anita believes that for men, the function of a woman is to be abused. Men, in her view, are abusers by default. If they choose not to abuse a woman, they are acting against the social programming. That is the only way to explain why she would say that the purpose of background women in video games is to be abused, instead of just seeing them as figures that populate the game's world. That is also the reason why she sees misogyny in many other places where it does not exist. Her entire Tropes vs. Women series is based on an illusory premise, and is nothing but a reflection of her own deep-seated hatred of men. Add misandry to the list of harmful feminist tropes that infest Anita Sarkeesian's work. We already have 6 regressive ways of thinking that she has unleashed on YouTube and on the art world. And no, we are not done.